In the previous 3 videos, we had a look at the ins and outs of the atmosphere, like the layers, the composition, and a specific look at the ozone layer. Now, in this video, we'll take a look at the heating of the atmosphere. We'll cover 2 different concepts today in this video. First, we'll look at the processes that heat the atmosphere, and then we'll take a look at how heat moves and transfers in the atmosphere. So, let's take a look at the processes that are involved in heating the atmosphere. Insolation is described as incoming solar radiation, which means that the sun's rays are coming through the atmosphere from space. Heat and light energy leave the sun as short-wave radiation to heat the atmosphere. We'll take a look at radiation and the different wavelengths in a little bit more detail later on. Next, we take a look at absorption, where heat energy is absorbed from the incoming solar radiation in the thermosphere and the stratosphere. Remember back to the first video that those layers are hot. The insulation will pass through into the troposphere and only a little bit of heat is absorbed before it reaches the Earth. From there, heat is absorbed by clouds and dust particles, as well as the Earth's surface and other surfaces on Earth. Scattering happens when the small particles, like condensation nuclei and gases, disperse the sun's rays in random directions without changing the wavelengths. Insolation can then be directed back into space and often does not reach the Earth's surface. Have you ever wondered why the clouds appear white? Clouds are white because they reflect a large quantity of light from the sun's rays back into the atmosphere. We call the percentage of light that is reflected albedo. Here, you can see a comprehensive diagram that shows you what happens to the solar radiation that comes into the atmosphere. Take a moment to pause the video and study it in detail. Now that we've looked at the different heat processes, let's take a look at how heat moves and is transferred through the atmosphere. When we talk about radiation, we talk about the transfer of heat by the means of waves. Heat from the sun in the form of radiation enters the atmosphere as insolation. As the Earth absorbs the heat, it becomes warm. Temperature determines whether the radiation is short-waved or long-waved. The sun, for example, is incredibly hot, so it radiates short-wave radiation. But remember that all warm objects can radiate heat. It just depends how warm they are as to whether they have short waves or long waves. The Earth, unlike the sun, is cool, so in this case it will radiate long-wave radiation. We call this type of radiation terrestrial radiation. Conduction is the next way that heat is transferred in the atmosphere. This occurs from one stationary molecule to the next. It is unfortunately not an effective means of heat transfer in gases, as the molecules move around and comes into contact with new molecules continuously. Convection is the means of heat transfer in moving air or in the water. This involves the movement of large volumes of water or parcels of air. Remember that hot air rises because it is light and cold air sinks because it is heavy. Radiation comes from the sun's rays and it heats the ground. Conduction heats the air, and convection occurs as the warm air rises. Next time, we will take a look at the infamous greenhouse effect and how it influences the heating of the atmosphere.